I will be crying my eyes out at the funeral, and she'll be sitting there in a red dress flirting with the organist.
You read that in Salinger.
I read that in Sophia's eyes.
Welcome to week 56 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have had a very hectic last few weeks as we suddenly found that we were going to be moving. So we've been packing and boxing and moving things into storage. And that's why this episode that we watched on February 18th is going to be reviewed today on March 23rd. So it's been over a month since we actually saw this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be, we now have a 2-month break before we can move into the new place. So we'll be actually moving up in the same building. So we'll have different lighting. Maybe it'll actually be good lighting.
And we might even have some scenery.
Yes, that's true, if we can aim out the window. So the episode that starts week 56, is episode 271, which originally aired Monday, August 19th, 1985. And Warren tells Lionel that he's a little annoyed that he had to learn from Frank Armstead that his father is dying. And, of course, Lionel said he didn't want to tell anyone really until he had to, but he definitely doesn't want Augusta to know.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells him all about the aneurysm and asks him to deliver the party invitations for him in person, which Warren at first doesn't really want to do, but then agrees to do. Lionel has one special envelope that he wants to deliver in person to the Contessa Armanti.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes over to see Sophia, who's waiting for Cece, and is a little bit concerned that Cece will discover Lionel there. But he actually delivers her the invitation and reveals to her why he's having the party, and she is suspicious right from the beginning that perhaps Lionel has confused something. So she gets him to disclose how he knows he's got an aneurysm, and Lionel said, well, I overheard Dr. Biddles on the phone, and I knew he was talking about me, because he said, oh, it was a powerful man, and what a shame it is. So I think Sophia already is suspecting that Dr. Biddles was not talking about Lionel, so she forces Lionel to call him immediately, and he confirms that, yes, he was talking about a different patient, and Lionel is not dying, and, of course, the doctor can't tell him who it really is, but after hanging up, Lionel sees from Sophia's face that it's probably Cece, because he realizes that Dr. Biddles is also Cece's doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And they discuss how that interesting encounter the other day at the Orient Express between Cece and Lionel, where each thought they were dying. So, happily, Lionel heads home, only to find that Lionel that Warren has already handed out the invitations. So, Warren is trying to get Lionel to tell Augusta what's going on. And he says, so first he tells her that he thought he was dying and with an aneurysm, and that it's actually Cece who has the aneurysm. And Augusta says, oh, there's one truth that nobody knows. And so Lionel wants to know more about that. She says, suffice it to say, it will destroy Cece when he hears about it. And then she says, I'll be crying my eyes out at the funeral, and she'll be sitting there in a red dress, flirting at the organist, referring to Sophia. And then Lionel says, you read that in Salinger. She says, I read that in her eyes. So he thinks that Sophia won't be too sad when Cece dies. She won't tell Lionel the secret, but says it will change his way of thinking forever. So,
Which it probably will, or possibly will, but I'm just not quite sure the chips are going to fall quite where Augusta thinks they will.
Well, I mean, I guess his thoughts about Channing will be a bit confused, realizing it was his son, and then, of course, Brandon being his grandson, and wondering if Cece's just going to abandon Brandon. I mean, I guess Augusta assumes that Cece cares for Brandon in some way since he's adopted him or married to Gina, but I think she also knows that Gina's grasp on that marriage is tenuous, so maybe Brandon's relationship with Cece.
But it does, as we've talked about before, also tie Lionel to Sophia forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Augusta still doesn't really believe that there's nothing between them but hate. Kelly tells Eden that she's embarrassed by the whole thing with Nick, and that they've made love more than once. A lot more than once, she says. So this is actually a good conversation, because we've just been seeing Nick pining for Kelly and Kelly having amnesia for quite a while now, and it's actually very sensible for two sisters to have this kind of a discussion with each other. So we've seen Nick and Cruz talking a few times about the relationship between Nick and Kelly, but this is actually really sensible. Kelly actually says to Eden that he took advantage of her, and Eden doesn't really fall on one side or the other of that. She just says that not every relationship is going to work out, but there's some good loving out there, and not to waste this time. So she's not really going to help Kelly delve into the whys and whats of Nick Kelly Gulch. She wants just Kelly to move on, and, move on from Joe and Nick. Kelly goes over to Nick's place, and Cruz is there. So Cruz and Kelly hug, and Cruz leaves Kelly and Nick to chat. And Kelly says, "I think it's better for both of us if we don't see each other anymore." And Nick, of course, is devastated, but he says, "I was thinking the same thing myself. I got carried away and took it too seriously." And then Kelly leaves, but she seems to have a bit of a tear in her eye. So maybe from a whole lot of different reasons. But Nick wanders aimlessly around his apartment. Santana is at the door to, I guess it's Kelly's room that Mason is in, but she's listening to Gina and Mason in the room, and knows some shenanigans are going down. So she runs downstairs to tell Cece, but he's in a hurry and leaves. And there's also discussion in this episode that he needs his rest because he's got a long day in the courtroom as well. So later when Cece comes back, she keeps asking, "Oh, have you had your rest yet?" Because she's thinking, he'll walk upstairs and overhear Gina and Mason together. Santana does hear him tell Sophia that he's changing his will. And he says he's updated the corporate bylaws to include Mason, and that Brandon is going to play a big part in his will. So this is actually some will stuff that we had postulated, with his impending aneurysm, and that timing might be everything with respect to Cece having some sort of attack and the will being filed, and several different people wanting the will to be a certain way. So Cece finally goes upstairs to rest, and he can barely make it up the stairs. And then Santana just realizes that if Cece finds Mason and Gina together, it might end up actually going badly for Brandon.
Yeah.
Because now that she's overheard Brandon's playing such a large part in the will. So, I mean, I don't think anything Gina does can really sully Brandon in Cece's eyes, because it's the fact that he's Channing's son that Cece's interested in. So, but I think Santana kind of is having second thoughts about trying to get Cece to witness Gina and Mason.
Yeah, I think it was a fairly easy calculus for her when she thought it was just going to be Mason benefiting from the will. And, she's mad at Mason and doesn't like Gina, and this would just be a really nice way to get a little bit of revenge on him to thwart that. But now that she finds this change actually involves Brandon, and she'll be potentially screwing over his future, as you say, it's definitely caused her to reconsider, I think.
She actually witnesses the next little bit. Throughout the episode, Gina is trying to seduce Mason, but Mason is actually trying to get some work done suddenly, because obviously Cece's told him that he's back in. Mason ends up intercepting a call for Cece, and I think that's how he gets some of the information, I believe. I didn't write down enough notes about that, but I wrote it down, so it's probably worth noting. Maybe with the next episode I can fill in exactly what that call was a bit. He contemplates being back at Capwell Enterprises by telling Gina, "The hand that writes the contracts holds a lot of power." So I guess he's thinking he can write things in certain ways to perhaps benefit himself in the future after Cece passes away. Gina asks about Eden. And Mason says she's not really a serious contender. This is a lot like the Fallon Adams stuff on Dynasty, I think. So I think Eden really is going to try and give Mason a run for his money at Capwell. Because unlike Mason, who has another job as a lawyer, Eden, well, she is running a restaurant, but I think she's got more time to put into Capwell Enterprises. So Mason keeps rejecting Gina's advances. A lot of amusing dialogue between them. He says he can't risk anything now that he's back in Cece's good books. And finally Gina says she's humiliated. Finally Gina says she's humiliated herself. "I feel unused," she says. She says he's the only man he wants, and takes off her top. She climbs on top of him on the bed, just as Cece arrives outside the door, and finding it locked, he takes out his key. And that's the bit that Santana actually is observing from, I guess, down the hall. So, do you think Cece will walk in and see Gina on top of Mason?
I actually think Santana might intervene and just draw his attention away, because I think, as we've said in this, over the course of this episode, I'm sure at the beginning of the episode she would have been more than happy to throw Mason under the bus and watch him fall. But now that she realizes how much is at stake with this potential change in the will, I don't think she'll want to endanger Brandon's future.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. Because Gina and Mason already have heard Cece saying, "Hey, why is this door locked?" So they're already trying to get themselves together into a decent state. So I think if Santana delays him just a little more, Gina can say, "Oh, how did this door get locked?" And Mason will be busily working away at his papers there.
Yeah.
So we got a couple bits of viewer mail recently. I'll just read one of them that came in about 3 weeks ago from someone in Germany whose name is apparently Procedural. They say, "Since Germany is mentioned several times in this video," and this is a video response to our video from week 4, actually.
Oh.
"Since Germany is mentioned several times in this video, I just wanted to leave some greetings from Germany. Hello, Germany. I started watching Santa Barbara a few months ago, currently at episode 180, and was looking for some commentary from other viewers. Well, that's exactly why we started the podcast, for those people searching for commentary from other viewers. So we found a person in the world. This podcast is for you."
And you could even deliver some of it in German.
I could. Maybe I'll do a German segment at some point. I watched a lot of Santa Barbara in the 90s when it aired in Germany when I was around 15. Now, I was in Germany in 92 for 3 months, and I know California Clan was playing there, and they were a bit behind, because I think Santa Barbara had already... Luckily, Santa Barbara went off the air before I went to Germany, I think. Or did it? Maybe not. Maybe I missed 3 months of Santa Barbara. Oh. Or, no, I had someone tape it for me. So I did watch it when I got back. But, I watched a few weeks of Santa Barbara, I think, in German when I was there. I recognize that this video is now almost 2 years old by itself, but maybe I will catch up later. So, that is the first of 2 comments by Procedural. We will save the next one for the end of another episode.
Okay.
Because we only, have 2 pieces of viewer mail.
We are not really influencers in the podcast world.
Yet. So this is the start of week 56, so this will be posted, after we finish the 5 episodes. I still haven't posted the last episode, or we were going to start splitting the extras into separate releases. So the next thing that I'm going to be releasing, probably within the next day or 2, is the Jerry Cooper Psycho Gazebo special for Jack's evil twin, and then probably next week I'll have that little skit we did of the masked podcasters, which is like a mock commercial, which you don't even remember, probably. And then the week after, I'll post the last 5 episodes. By then, we should have these 5 done. So maybe we'll get back on a bigger schedule and better schedule. But in June, of course, we will be starting to move. So there may be some more delays. But we're going to try and just do it on the weekends because we have some luxury of we don't have to give this place up right away, and everything else is in storage. So we will try and get on a more regular schedule. And that is it for episode 271. We will be back next time after we watch episode 272 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's nice, dear. Why don't you stand up and I'll do you a favor, too?
Gina.
I feel unused.
Welcome back to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 272, originally aired Tuesday, August 20th, 1985. Sophia finds Cruz and Eden kissing in her guest house, and Cruz tells her that they have Mr. C to thank for pushing them back together. And then she asks them if that means the engagement is on, and they said, well, Eden says we're still having negotiations. So they discuss their various differences. They agree on having 2 kids, and none in the first year. And then they kind of let the other problems go by the wayside and decide to just accept each other. So then Cruz gets down on his knee to ask Eden to marry him, which she didn't really think was necessary, but he said he wanted to do it the way his father probably proposed to his mother. And that got me thinking about Henry Darrow, who will be playing Cruz's father in the future, and he passed away a couple of days ago on March 14th at the age of 87. So I had originally been aware of him from playing in Zorro and Son, and we've seen him on a few of our Mannix, Barnaby Jones police story episodes that we've seen. Julia borrows a dress from Augusta for her date with Jack, and at his office she meets his new secretary, Ingrid, and is jealous. They end up having a nice time, locked in his office, but then he gets called away, and she goes home to change for their second date at 3 o'clock. Augusta says she's never heard the word commitment and Jack Lee in the same sense, so she's a bit wary of Julia's excitement about this relationship. When Julia goes back, she overhears Jack asking Ingrid out to lunch, and I think she's a bit heartbroken because it sounds like he's kind of underplaying the relationship between him and Julia to Ingrid.
Yeah. Now, considering she and Augusta were dating him at the same time years ago, I'm not sure it should be a complete surprise that Jack may have be a bit of a ladies' man. But anyway, I think perhaps the experience together in New Stalin made her think that perhaps her commitment or his commitment to her was a little deeper than it was before.
She actually says to Augusta that our time being shipwrecked together really brought us together.
Yeah.
Before Santana can stop him, Cece unlocks the door to Kelly's room and bursts in, only to find Gina and Mason still on the bed. They haven't managed to get themselves decent at all. It's very clear that they were fooling around on the bed. And Cece punches Mason and says he's out of the will, Gina's out of the will, he's out of the company. And Santana eggs him on by saying, what if Brandon had walked in on them? And so he said, I'm taking Brandon away as well, he tells Gina. So all of this anger triggers an attack, and Dr. Biddle comes over and says that he's obviously had a small stroke since his hand is numb. And he's still hiding all this from Gina and Mason. He calls Jack over to draw up a totally new will and redraw all the company documents that have just been previously drawn up to give Mason, his return to the company. And he tells Jack he's dying of an aneurysm, but he doesn't want Gina or Mason to know.
I was a little disappointed it came to a head this quickly. I was hoping it would kind of get drawn out a little bit longer, just build up a little, because Mason's barely been there. Like, he's been there about an hour.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen him settle into the house and you know, a few more dynamics, kind of, because we haven't really seen what it would be like for Mason and Sophia to be in the same house, for example. And I think that would have been quite interesting. So
Yeah.
would have liked to have seen that build up a little bit more before the inevitable reveal.
Because they've got Kelly back home, and he's been trying to tempt Ted back, but they haven't really got everyone back together yet. I had sort of remembered from way back that at some point Cece walks in on Mason and Gina, and even when it was happening, you know, I didn't think it was going to be in this episode. I assumed it was going to be, you know, months from now. So Mason warns Gina that life is going to be terrible for her without the Capwell patronage. And Cece tries to throw her out immediately, but Mason says that would be traumatic for Brandon. So Cece agrees to let her stay in the house until the divorce is final, but that he doesn't want to run into her at any time. And he tells her he's taking Brandon from her, and when Gina says who will raise him, Santana's listening, hoping it's going to be Santana. He says, "Oh, Sophia and I will do it." So, of course, he hasn't told them that he's dying of an aneurysm. But Gina then accuses Santana of setting the whole thing up, and Santana says, No, I tried to stop him." He did. He actually said, she actually said, "Well, what if Kelly's in there? You don't want to just barge in there." But, she and Gina trade some barbs. She mentions Gina, you know, losing custody because of her drugs and things like that. So Sophia has to break them up. And then I guess Santana wants to know if Sophia would have been okay with Channing marrying the maid's daughter. Mm-hmm. And Sophia reassures her that if she'd been there, she wouldn't have been pushing for her to give up Brandon. So maybe Santana has a possible ally in Sophia.
Well, we have seen them sort of partner up a little bit before. I mean, remember when Gina had her fall down the stairs, you know, she felt that Santana and Sophia had ganged up on her in a way. So there has been at least a little bit of a hint of some sort of alliance between them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will see, because the potential of Cece, you know, having a further stroke is possible. So Dr. Biddle gave him something for the stroke, and Cece said, "Oh, I hope this will keep me going long enough because I got a lot of things I need to finish up." So but he'll be constantly, you know, under threat, I think, in the coming days. And you know, as I said before, I had remembered something about a will, you know, and Mason, but I'm not sure if this is that case, because it doesn't seem like, you know, they could stop the will from being changed unless Cece has his second stroke before he can sign the papers. And I had a vague memory of Cece being in the hospital at Christmas time, and it's only August, so I don't know. Maybe there's some clever way they're going to drag this out for 4 months, or maybe it's a completely different hospitalization at Christmas time that I'm thinking of, you know, in a future year. I don't know. We will see.
Or they'll shift the storyline for a month to Eden and Cruz or something like that.
Cece tells Mason he's off Ted's case. So that's Mason. I haven't talked about it too much, but Mason's pretty upset the whole episode. You know, blames Gina to some extent for the situation that they were found in, but he's not too hard on her, I don't think, because he realizes he's, you know, to blame also.
Yeah, and he's also kind of used to that with Cece by now, I would say. I did wonder about, you know, him taking Mason off the case. It would seem to me that that would be more Ted's decision, unless, because I assume Ted is a minor, maybe the decision does rest with Cece. But at any rate, I can't imagine that helping Cece's relationship with Ted very much.
No, and I just can't imagine it'd be good for the case.
No.
With a jury trial, to suddenly drop your brother as the defense attorney.
Now, it is, in many ways, a very typical CC move, because he does tend to be quite impetuous and imperious in that way. But one could also wonder if it's a little bit of a function of the aneurysm as well.
That's right. He's probably quite, in quite a lot of pain, so he's probably kind of edgy. He says to Santana, I expected this from Gina, this kind of thing, but I'm shocked Mason would do it when he's just finally gotten back into my good graces. Eden arrives just as Mason is leaving. She's planning to announce her engagement. Cece ends up telling Eden that he has an aneurysm and may die soon, and he makes her promise not to keep him on life support when the time comes. And I have a feeling that will play an important role at some point, especially if Mason and Gina are lucky enough for him not to have signed the will before he becomes incapacitated, which means Gina is still his wife and would say, she might be at odds with Eden over the life support. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I could imagine there could actually be quite a few ramifications if Cece gets knocked out of the picture for a little while, with the will not having been changed and Gina still being his wife and Mason still having been given, a certain amount of power. There could be lots of clashes, not just between Gina and Eden, but with Sophia, and certainly that would always be fuel for her disagreements with Santana.
I guess Gina would want him to be taken off life support, so I don't know. Somehow there's got to be something to do with that, I imagine.
Yes, and it'll be interesting also, given all this, to see how things play out with Augusta's knowledge now that Brandon is actually Lionel's grandson. So how does that play into this as well? I'm sure it will play into things eventually, but does it play into this whole thing during Cece's health crisis, or does that become an issue maybe after this particular health crisis?
Mason calls Lindsay Smith to ask him for a favor. And it's clear from what he says while waiting for Lindsay to come to the phone and afterwards that this is something that's going to hurt Cece. So it appears to me he's going to try to reveal that Channing was gay at some point in the near future. Now, I don't know if this is something that could logically come out at Ted's trial, but then again, there is the other trial, the murder trial, and I don't know if Mason will be involved in that since Jack's handling that. But yeah, it's interesting to wonder what the favor could be, because we weren't expecting to see Lindsay until the other trial, I would think. So yeah, we will see. And I don't know if Lindsay would consider doing a favor like that for Mason. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what it exactly is.
Yeah, well, we don't know what it is, or entirely which storyline it'll play into.
And that is the end of the episode, and we had a full cast credits today, which we last had one last week, and episode 267, and there's no difference on the main cast at all. And last time we had the judge and the DA and the cast list, and today we have Dr. Biddle and Ingrid, played by Marcy Hansen. So we will see if Jack's secretary, I guess that she's taking Amy's place. So we'll see how big of a role Jack's secretary gets in the show if she becomes another Veronica.
And Amy is still in the credits, so whether we get another phone call from her, from New Stalin, or what, where that goes, we'll have to see.
Yeah, it seems like it's still afternoon because Jack and Julia were supposed to meet at 3. So they were talking about a full day in court. Presumably that's the next day. So we may actually still have another full episode without any courtroom stuff if it's already 3 p.m. Today. They wouldn't just skip the rest of the day, I would think. At least because Julia and Jack, you would think that scene would play out on the current day. So yeah, I don't expect to see Ted Lincoln or any of the court-related things for at least another day.
Yeah.
So, all right, we will be back after we watch Episode 273 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
He's going to help me perform the last rites over the legend of Channing Capwell Jr.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 273 of Santa Barbara. And we noticed that Cruz is limping in one of the scenes. So I'm assuming A. Martinez is still recovering from his injury from a few weeks ago, or episodes ago. Cruz mentions to Eden that their investigation into the shirt didn't really work out for them. So there's nothing they can do to help Ted based on that shirt. Maybe there's a chance they could still track that person down in Europe at some point, but it looks like things don't look that good for Ted. Eden's worried about him. Lindsay Smith arrives at the courthouse because Mason had called him, thinking that Mason wants him for the case. But Mason says that he wants Lindsay to meet Cece, who knows all about him and Channing, and has accepted it. So this is actually quite a bad trick to play on Lindsay.
Yeah,
from Mason's
poor old
standpoint.
Lindsay's going to really suffer the wrath of CC in this.
Mm-hmm.
And be ruined potentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lindsay says he's married now, but Mason talks him into, thinking that Cece wants to see him. He asks if Lindsay has any photos. I guess Mason's lost his photos. Did Santana destroy them or something? I can't quite remember. Lindsay, of course, had said he destroyed everything before, and he reveals he has one photo of himself and Channing left. So he brings that to Mason later on. And Sophia sees that transaction and goes up to Mason and asks him what he's up to. I think she's obviously worried about anything that could set off Cece's aneurysm and trigger another stroke in him. Sophia tells Cece that people will see that he's sick if he goes to the trial because he's looking quite poorly. And later at the courthouse, Cece asks Sophia to marry him once he's free of Gina. And she did say yes, right?
I think she looked happy. I can't remember if she said yes or not, but I think it's a foregone conclusion that is what she would like.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you could sort of see the potential storm way off in the future when Cece does learn that Channing was not really his son, and that you could see how that plan could be derailed.
I could see that happening on the wedding day if things are written to the most extreme. Just as Cece's ready to walk down the aisle, Mason will go, "Oh, Dad, found out some information about Channing you might want to know."
Well, yeah, or I mean, I'm thinking of the revelation Augusta will have.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking somehow Mason will find it out, and be more, because Augusta's, not too willing to spread the information now that she's realized Brandon, is a link between Lionel and Sophia. So I think someone who's got less to lose will be the one who could reveal it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Santana found out if she would find it useful to use that. Actually, it would be for Santana because that would sever the link between Cece and Brandon. So Santana, if she somehow found out.
Yeah, I guess it could. Although then Brandon would not have access to the wealth either. So on that
there's
side
the Lockridge wealth then.
Yes, which is not quite as substantial as
I don't know if
Capwell
Santana
wealth,
knows
but
So, at the Lockridge house, Warren appears to have broken two of his fingers. Now, that didn't happen in story, so maybe the cast is just accent prone. Maybe. I
feel like maybe they all were off on a vacation at some point and maybe had a lot of accidents, water skiing, and that sort of thing while they were on a break.
Mm-hmm. He has put an ad in the paper to try and find Morgan Malone. So that storyline is still putting along.
Yeah.
Later, he tells Mason he got a response from his ad and that he has set up a meeting with Morgan Malone at Maggie's house. So that happened very quickly in between scenes. And Mason says he's too busy with Ted's trial to attend that meeting, but he tells them to go ahead. So presumably, as we're unlikely to see Maggie, the next thing we'll see Warren saying, "Oh, I had a meeting with Morgan Malone and Maggie yesterday, and here's his signed statement." Or we'll see Maggie's house with Warren and Morgan Malone in the living room, and Maggie's making tea in the next room or something, and we just hear Warren say, "Oh, I'll have another cup as well," something like that. So, although I don't know if they need to build a whole Maggie's house set just for a meeting with Morgan Malone. So maybe it will make more sense to, just show them at the bistro or something. Ted asks Mason if he's moved back into the mansion yet, and Mason says not yet. I guess he doesn't want to bog Ted's mind down with his troubles.
No.
And we see in the background the Theta trying to get reporters to interview her. So, because Ted is, blowing them off, obviously. Cruz reports back to Mason that Nick, who we have never seen in the courtroom, but who has been there every time photographing, has noticed that Christie just seems to stare at Steve in between interactions with people, and Mason and Cruz jump to the conclusion that Steve knows that Christie is lying and is covering for her. So that's the path that they have now to work with, and I don't know what kind of investigation you could do with that. It would almost have to be something that comes up in questioning on the stand, I think. So maybe Mason's trying to figure out how he can bring this up maybe during questioning or something. I still feel that at some point he's going to put Mary on the stand, and that's going to turn everything. So I'm not quite sure what that questioning could take that could suddenly turn everything around. But I feel it's going to be Mary. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be Christie. Maybe she'll finally. So on the stand, Mason questions Ted at first, and he reveals that Ted rejected going to both Harvard and Stanford because he wanted to stay with Lakin. So he's trying to, establish a stable relationship with Lakin in Santa Barbara. Then Steve takes over the cross-examination and asks Ted about, when did he first have sex with Lakin and how many times have they had sex? And he says, oh, just, the day I got arrested 2 or 3 times, I guess. So then Steve talks about that year where he was not having sex with Lakin and suggests that he opted for Christie because she seemed to him like someone who would be amenable to that. And then Ted points out that rape is not a sexual crime, it's a crime of violence. And I thought that was a very good point. But then Steve quickly suggests that losing his mother at a young age has caused him to hate women. And Mason, objects and says that, Steve doesn't have a degree in psychiatry, so he probably shouldn't be making diagnoses on the stand.
Yeah. And it's interesting, looking at Ted's testimony and Mason's questioning of him, and then Steve's. And of course, we know Steve's history with Christie a little bit, and we know a little bit about some of the demons that Steve has. And so when we see him questioning Ted and his questions getting more and more salacious, I think there's kind of an undercurrent there that, we know how much Steve hates Ted and how much he wants to destroy him. And I think we're seeing that come through a little bit in this very, very aggressive line of questioning.
Well, Mason decides to follow suit with his questioning. He questions Christie, and he asks her about her living arrangements and how, the whole family's kind of living together in the same building, and how it's nice for her to have the family back together. And then he gets her to admit that, he asks her why she left home, and then he gets her to admit that she told each of her family members a different reason and circumstance to her leaving her home. And then she admits that she lied to them about her various jobs that she had while she was away, such as being an underage cocktail waitress at a bowling alley. I think she told them that she was, doing acting parts, things like that. So he suggests that she is used to lying by default, and that when Mary put Ted Capwell's name into her mouth, she just went with it, so that she could keep her happy family together. And Christy does pretty well under the onslaught, because Mason really actually, escalates against her quite strongly. And she says that she knows it was Ted Capwell that beat and raped her. So very definitive statement. And the judge, tells her she can step down after the testimony. And then she says she still has something to say. So I wonder what that would be.
Well, one thing we do see, actually I think it's before she goes, she undergoes that questioning, is there, there is a little point where they have a break, and she kind of comes to the realization, as her family's standing around her, that they've all been brought together by this circumstance. Now, of course, Mary and Theda have no idea just what that circumstance really was, but superficially they've all been brought together, and she's realizing that even getting a bit of family unity out of this terrible circumstance is not going to change anything. That this is not actually necessarily going to make her life better, being on better terms with the family. And she's kind of saying that to herself on the break. So I don't know if that will necessarily play into what she's going to say next, but it seemed to me she had made some sort of a decision at that time, or she'd come to some sort of a place in her mind about things. And I don't know if that'll be reflected. I'm not really expecting her to repudiate her claim against Ted, because she's just been so forceful about it.
Yeah.
So I just don't know quite what she's going to say.
I'm thinking it might be just something like against Mason, blaming the victim type of thing. So.
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling that it'll be kind of a blanket statement about how everyone is treating her, and we'll know a little bit of the undercurrent of that is probably aimed at Steve as well, actually. But I think, she's really being raked through the mud, yeah, especially in her eyes, and really being underestimated and kind of thrown away by everybody. And I suspect that's going to be perhaps what she talks about.
And then I'm not sure what would be next in the trial. I mean, if Ted and Christy have both testified, we know Jade's not going to be testifying anymore. I'm not sure who Mason could call additionally. So we may be, once whatever Christy says is resolved, we may be moving on to the closing arguments, unless Cruz finds something out, unexpectedly.
Yeah, I feel we're at the point in the plot where, we expect the Capwells to be on the verge of losing. I mean, my expectation is they're on the verge of losing, and then there's some sort of a redemption and something that comes in and changes things.
Yeah, maybe he'll call Theda and Mary and maybe some random, guy that Christy used to work with or something in Ventura. I guess they're from Ventura, I think, originally. I thought they were from a different town, much further away, Moderna or something. But maybe I just misheard, the way Todd McKee said Ventura.
Yeah.
They were in a car at the time, so maybe sound was muffled. So Ventura is much closer to Santa Barbara than Moderna.
Yeah, so we'll see. The other thought I had, and we've kind of seen the whole shirt thing kind of tossed away, but I had really been hoping to meet the character that Steve sent off to Europe. And it would be kind of interesting if they were able to track that character down and that character was able to talk a little bit about their relationship with Steve, buying him the shirt and then being kind of shoved off to Europe. That might be a potential as well.
It seems unlikely it's something that could come out in Mary's testimony, even though she's aware of the shirt, because I just can't see how Mason would think to ask her about that. Even if he somehow was able to talk to the woman in Europe, find out about the details, I don't know if that would still help without her actually being back in Santa Barbara.
That's why I was thinking that maybe, as I say, the conversation Christy had with her family at the break, maybe that causes her to say something, you know, in her little address that we're going to hear at this next episode, and maybe that gets Mary thinking, and then maybe that, when she's on the stand, gives Mason something to question her with, and maybe that is what breaks it open.
Maybe Mason could even overhear a conversation between Mary and Steve or something about something, and that would give him a clue as to the line of questioning he could put forth to Mary or something like that.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to mention with this episode, in some ways, you know, especially thinking about that period during the break, and we're seeing all kinds of sort of shenanigans during that break, where you've got Sophia kind of coming up to Mason and saying, well, what are you planning, really? Because I think she's thinking of the various scheming he's doing, you know, around all the business he's got with CC and Gina. And Gina's pestering Mason to pay attention to her. And I thought in some ways, CC of all people seemed to be the one who had the most perspective on things when he says, you know what, Mason just has to concentrate on Ted's defense right now. And I was kind of surprised seeing all these other characters. I think Eden had that right perspective as well, but I was kind of surprised to see like Sophia and Gina twittering away about this other stuff, when I think if you were really in that situation, you would just be all about the defense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I just feel, unless it's going to be another one of those adjournments, that, you know, this is a Thursday episode coming up, that by Friday we should be close to the end of this trial. So.
Yeah, I think something pretty big has to happen tomorrow, really, because it's a cliffhanger episode, I assume.
Well, this one we're about to watch is Thursday, so we got two.
Oh, so we got two.
Yeah, we got two more this week.
So yeah, I'm feeling like the next two will be pretty.
Monday and Tuesday
game-changing.
we didn't see the trial, so the trial didn't start till Wednesday, and then they were saying CC should get his rest because tomorrow's a big day, so presumably we'll have, you know, continuation of this big day tomorrow and Friday. Well, we're probably going to watch episode 274 in a few minutes. So we will be back after we've seen episode 274 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Won't be long and she'll be out of our lives.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Last night we finished episode 274 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Thursday, August 22nd, 1985. Ooh, it's coming towards the end of the summer. I have no idea what I was doing that summer. But I'm going to Okanagan College in the fall for my second year. I'm only doing one semester there, and then I'm going to transfer up to SFU in Vancouver. Well, Burnaby. And so I've only got 4 courses, not a full 5. So it'll be more time to watch Santa Barbara, hopefully. Theta tells Christy she's messing up their book deal and the magazine interview she has planned. So Mary says, oh, do you want Christy to get raped once a year so you can have a new book deal every year? Cruz brings Mason and Steve the new forensic findings, which we do not find out the contents of just yet. Back on the stand, Christy announces that she remembers that Ted left after their fight and that now she is sure he didn't rape her. So exactly the thing we didn't think was going to happen, because it was so close on the heels of her saying that she was sure it was Ted. So that's kind of weird, actually.
Well, I think... I'm not sure we actually know for sure what Christy was going to say when she first said she had something to say. Because the judge then, at Steve's request, granted a little break. Now, Steve, of course, was all mad. He was angry about it. He didn't want Christy to say anything beyond what they had rehearsed. And he was trying to completely squelch it. But Mason stood up for Christy and insisted that everyone hear what she had to say. And the judge agreed, but wanted a little break just to kind of take in, I guess, this new bit of information. So during the break, we saw, a lot of things. It's like with the last one, a lot of things actually happened during that break. So predictably, Steve was being very bullying to Christy, and Mary witnessed this. So we'll see if that plays a role in anything later.
That's true.
But also, we saw the whole thing with Cruz suddenly having this new information. And he came and brought that to Steve. And I think that combined with, Steve bullying her yet again, I think that actually played a role in what Christy actually did say afterwards. And she was actually quite clever about it. She actually said that she didn't remember what happened, but that she couldn't actually say that Ted had raped her. In fact, she was quite sure he hadn't. And that what had jogged her memory was, first of all, the shirt, because she didn't think that was the shirt Ted was wearing. So we kind of circled back to that. But it turns out that Cruz's evidence involved the skin under her fingernails and there being a layer over the layer that she had scratched Ted with. And I guess Christy heard this when he was mentioning it to Steve or something. But she explicitly says this, and she realizes then, what she says, she realizes then that it wasn't Ted, and she must have blacked out, but she's very sure now it wasn't Ted. So I think this was very clever, because basically by taking the attitude that this was all a mistake, she didn't remember, she's kind of taken the sting out of Steve's vendetta against Ted. He can't say that she directly went against everything, because she's saying she didn't remember. She's not accusing him. So I think she's removed Ted from danger. But the other thing she's done is she's controlled the narrative around this new evidence. So Steve couldn't come romping in and dismiss it and get it kind of cast aside. She actually says that that's a pivotal thing in helping her realize that Ted wasn't the person who did this. So she's kind of blocked him on that as well.
She mentions having read up on mental blocks after it was mentioned to her by one of the psychiatrists, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
Or counselors, I guess. So Steve does then say, "Oh yes, I've got this forensic report," and then he basically reiterates what Christy says, as if he was, he's now too changing his ideas based on this new evidence.
Yeah.
So Mason moves for the charges to be dismissed, and then Steve, based on that evidence and Christie's new testimony, he agrees that the district attorney's office is going to drop the charges. And the judge, warns, well, you can't retry Ted Capwell for this anymore, so are you absolutely sure you want to drop it? And so the judge agrees to dismiss the charges and apologizes to Ted and admonishes the DA's office and says, you've got to go out and find the real rapist now.
Yeah.
At some point, Christy promises Steve that she'll do anything he wants in order to keep Ted safe, because he still kind of menaces Ted a bit. Mary is very upset with the evil thoughts she's had towards Ted. And, there was actually a point early in the episode, I think maybe during the break, where Mason, gives Mary a chance to not be so vindictive against Ted, and she doesn't do it. So now he's got the moral higher ground over Mary at this point. Steve brings Christy over to his apartment and tells her it's time for her first payment. So he starts to remove his tie. It's very disturbing that this is going to be the future for Christy.
Yeah, you can see her, really taking this in, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes, because I'm sure it won't head to a good place. So we'll just have to see what to make of that, and whether this will play a role in tomorrow's cliffhanger or not.
Warren is on the phone with Maggie, who's in New York. So maybe we will see Maggie's house without her. She's taken Ben there for some promising treatment. So now we're suddenly, knowing Maggie's not coming back, we can see an endpoint for all the storylines suddenly falling into place. Morgan Malone arrives at Maggie's house expecting to see Ben. So I guess maybe I glossed over it yesterday or didn't con to it, but I guess Warren's ad in the paper was apparently written from the standpoint of Ben wanting to see Morgan. So Morgan thinks Ben's going to be there, and he turns on the lights, and it's Warren. And Warren reveals, no, Ben's still in his coma. But he manages to convince him to tell his story to Mason and Julia later. And he does. He says that Ben pushed him out of the way the day that the drill bit came loose, and then it ended up just crushing his hand. He's got a black glove over his hand. Morgan Malone is being played by Richard Mall, who we all know best as Bull from Night Court.
Now, he's got a little more hair in this when he played Bull.
Yes. And time-wise, I think Night Court started in 83, didn't it? The year after Cheers, which was 82. So he's been playing Bull for a couple of years by this point. So maybe during the summer, he let his hair grow back a bit. I don't know. So he said that while he was recovering, a man from Capwell showed up with a briefcase full of cash and offered it to him for his silence and not to mention the safety violations. And then when Ben was declared beyond help, Morgan figured, well, there's not much point in revealing the truth, so I will stay silent. And he took the cash, but then he said he felt guilty, and the reason he left was not so he could enjoy the cash. He left his wife because he felt guilty about it, and in fact, he hasn't spent a penny of it yet. And he's brought a briefcase with all the cash in it. So I don't know if that Mason seemed excited by that fact. So maybe that helps, with his credibility by saying that he never cashed the money. And then Mason asked, "Do you ever take that glove off?" And he says, "Well, for special occasions." And Mason says, "Oh, I think we may have a special occasion." He also mentions he's never met CC Capwell personally, so I'm wondering if Mason's planning some sort of press conference or something that, where he'll reveal the crippled hand and make CC. I mean, it's perfect timing with being on CC's bad side again, because now he can bring Lindsay in, and he can bring Morgan Malone in, and continue his previous schemes against CC in a way. Lakin takes the ring off the chain around her neck and gives it to Ted to put on her finger. I cannot remember if this was an engagement ring or what this ring was. Sort of drawing a blank on the ring. Do you remember the ring at all? When Ted gave it to her?
I don't remember the context.
No, I don't. The party number 1 begins at the Capwell house. Cruz has been promised by Eden that she'll be wearing a dress that will make him forget he's in public, and they end up spending a lot of the party in a corner alone, kissing and dancing. At one point, Eden asks if he likes the music while they're dancing. It's the instrumental version of the change in me is you, and he says, "Oh, I thought that music was in your head," which is kind of funny because they had just shown it over several scenes of them getting ready for the party. And she says, "No, Ted put it on the sound system." So it's kind of funny. Mason shows up to support Ted, but he can only avoid Cece noticing him for so long, and then Cece's very annoyed that he's there, and how dare you come here? There's also talk of the party moving to the Orient Express, but before that can happen, Lindsay shows up, and Mason continues with his subterfuge that, "Oh, Cece's so anxious to meet you," and Mason introduces him to Cece, and Lindsay immediately thanks him for supporting his relationship with Channing. And Cece has kind of a stunned look on his face. And that is how the episode ended. So I don't know if we will see the party continue to the Orient Express, or if Cece's going to have a stroke right there and then when Lindsay continues on about how much he loved Channing. And
yeah, there's a lot of potential for the cliffhanger coming up tomorrow, whether it'll be Cece being triggered into an aneurysm by Lindsay, sort of innocently revealing his story with Channing, whether it'll be something to do with Steve and Christy, maybe some sort of big reveal, as you say, at a press conference, or maybe something with the Richard Mall's character's hand, and the whole Ben Gillis lawsuit.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do that thing where they manage to drag it out to the end of the episode. The Lindsay Cece conversation is truncated by some event happening. Then everything moves to the Orient Express. Then, maybe Mason calls a quick press conference. He does the Morgan Malone thing, and then at the end of the episode, he brings out Lindsay to finish that conversation, which they did once before in a very clever way. So, it'll be interesting to see how much gets piled on to Cece in just this one episode, or if they're going to, save the Warren thing for later, or the Maggie thing for later next week. But
yeah, I mean, for me, the only thing with the Lindsay thing is it's almost a little bit of old news now because we've known about it for so long.
And some of the family knows about it too, right?
Yeah,
So.
And, I guess the sort of the part of it that is suspenseful is how Cece will react and whether that will trigger a stroke. But, remember, we also know that Channing isn't even Cece's son, so that's actually in some ways going to be even a bigger revelation when that comes out.
Well, you can see why the revelations have to come in this order.
Yeah.
Because he only is going to care about this as much as long as he thinks Channing was his son. But, I mean, he did raise Channing as his son and to be his successor. So I don't know if finding out that Lionel was the father is going to be completely make him cut off Channing from his life, although that is what he's done with Mason every time Mason's done something. So maybe that's what Mason's hoping. As soon as Channing is revealed to be Lionel's son, that, well, Mason doesn't know yet, does he?
Mason doesn't know yet.
But, I think every time he tells Cece something about Channing, he's hoping that'll be the thing that gets him to cut him off, just like he does all his other kids whenever they do something wrong. So.
I think the other one, though, when that's revealed, that Channing's not really Cece's son, could potentially have larger reverberations because that threatens the relationship with Sophia. It threatens the relationship with Brandon.
Well, he'll be very angry with Sophia. I think that's why I'm thinking he'll be just about to marry her when it gets revealed. It
reignites the whole thing with the Lockridges, which could affect Ted and Laken's relationship. Of course, it reverberates into Lionel's relationship with Augusta.
Yeah, if Cece finds out before Lionel, then, Cece showing up with a bullwhip again and Lionel not knowing what the heck's going on.
So I think that, is potentially the bigger thing. Of course, if the revelation about Lindsay triggers an aneurysm or some sort of episode, that'll be big too, just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other one has the potential to affect more characters.
So I'm thinking we'll wrap up the Maggie thing next, and it probably won't take long. Jack will say, "CC, I think you should take it." And then we've got Sophia's trial to look forward to. So there may be a few days of, winding down, Ted's celebration and the Maggie thing. But then, maybe next week they won't talk about it. But then the week after, Steve Bassett will really want to go after the Capwells because he's lost one already.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those stories intersect because, Christy will be unhappily kind of bound to Steve if she doesn't, do something drastic first. And then, Mary's already got, I think, a few suspicions that things are not quite right there.
She did look, when Steve came home, Christy was still with Mary in the house. When Steve came home, Christy jumped.
Yeah.
And Mary noticed, the tension between them. So.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out and what ramifications that has as well.
All right. Well, we've got an exciting Friday episode coming up. So we'll be back after we watched episode 275 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, with you two, there's always room for one less, isn't there?
Welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have finished watching the Friday episode of week 56, episode 275. Lincoln and Ted detour to the Lockridge house on their way from the Capwell house to the party at the Orient Express. They fool around for a while and then head on to the party. Fruit, says Mason to Lindsay, offering him some grapes. That's just one of the many digs that Mason took at Lindsay during the meeting with Cece, which Cece failed to grasp entirely what was going on. Lindsay told Cece about how his friendship with Channing started as hero worship and then became friendship, and Mason was smirking in the background at all of the double meanings that Cece was just not picking up on. And Cece finally says, "I just don't see what exactly you and Peter Flint were blackmailing Channing over." And finally it dawns on Lindsay that Cece really has no idea what the true relationship between him and Channing was. And he gets up and says, "Mason, you're going to have to tell him yourself." And he storms out. So I'm kind of happy that Lindsay wasn't embarrassed so thoroughly in front of Cece. By being the one
I was too. And, I think, Mason's really chomping at the bit to tell Cece about this. But, it's going to have a lot less impact, I think, coming from Mason, because I think Cece can just kind of blow it off. Now, the photo...
He's got that in his pocket. He took it out of his briefcase earlier and had it ready. So.
Yeah.
But, what could it be, if Lindsay's been carrying it around? I assume it's them hugging or having a kiss or something. But, we'll see how Cece's reaction to this is. Coming from Mason, you're right. It would have been more shocking, I think, for it to just have come out from Lindsay.
I think it would be easier for Cece to somehow turn it on something he's going to blame Mason for. But, even if he does go full tilt on this, I think it will ultimately, I hope, be a bit better for Lindsay not being right there, in the middle of it, and hopefully won't end up with him being ruined completely.
Well, this is the last time we'll ever see Lindsay.
Oh, okay.
That was his final appearance. So, bit of a shame because he was an interesting character, and probably one of many interesting characters that people wish had stuck around longer over the years of Santa Barbara.
Well, that's really interesting. So I guess that means we won't hear any follow-up debate between him and Mason about this. So.
No, I don't think so. IMDb shows that as his last credit, and even there's not even a voiceover listed, in case he's on the phone with Mason or something. So it's a bit of a shame. Actually, potential relationship between him and Santana too, never explored. So it's interesting, they're talking about Cece's homophobia, but clearly Mason's, treating Lindsay as a lesser person throughout this whole thing. So
Yeah.
it's not just Cece. So. Oh, I forgot to say one of the things that Lakin says to Ted. One of the things that Lakin says to Ted when they're fooling around in the house between their parties is, next time you have to get up and testify about our sex life, I want you to have more to talk about. Steve and Christy are interrupted by Mary barging in, and then by Theta. Finally, Steve goes into the bedroom and tells Christy to make herself comfortable, and she steals his money and runs out, leaving the door open. Mary wanders in to the open door, and Steve, thinking Christy is still there, is saying some things to her that aren't particularly damning, unfortunately. So Mary just thinks it's weird that he thinks Christy's there, and she's not. Mary's actually worried about Theta, because Theta has been talking about confronting the Capwells. So Steve says, well, you go look for Theta, and I'll go look for Christy.
Though I did think that Mary was picking up on a little bit in her 2 times bursting into the room unexpectedly, that, I think she could see that there was some odd tension between Steve and Christy the first time. Mm-hmm. And the second time, you're right, Steve didn't say anything incriminating, but he's standing there with his shirt half off. So, why would he be doing that if he thinks Christy's there?
Christy ends up phoning Ted from a payphone. She phones Lakin's house, and, Lakin's not too happy to hand the phone over to Ted, but she just wants to warn Ted that Theta's on the warpath and that she should maybe warn Cece not to let her into the mansion at all.
Yeah.
But then Christy spots something that frightens her, and she ends up dropping the phone in the phone booth and runs off. Mm-hmm. And we're not actually shown what it is.
I'm assuming it's Steve's car or something like that, maybe?
I don't think so, because I think we see Steve later. But maybe there's a combination of things going on there. So, Mason introduces Cece to Morgan Malone, and Morgan shows Cece his crippled hand, and Mason says Morgan will be contacting the press in 1 hour if Cece doesn't pay. And he wants $10 million and a public apology. And I think also the third thing was admission of guilt or liability or whatever. Next thing you know, Warren has come over to pick up the check. And Cece's writing it out, and he says, but I'm going to subtract Mason's fee from this. I don't want him profiting from this at all. So Warren's kind of tough spot here, because he really wants that check, and he says, well, Mason has earned the money. Doesn't want to push Cece over the edge there. So actually, Warren was in a really tough situation here, and Mason, I guess, finally realizes that the important thing is that Maggie get the money. So he says, you know what, I'm going to waive my fee, and I want you to make out that check for the full amount, but to Maggie. And Cece agrees to that. So next thing you know, Warren's on the phone with Maggie, and he's got the check in his hand and says, good news, we've got the money. You can go ahead with the treatment. So
I'm assuming that wraps up the Ben Gillis-Maggie storyline.
Well, it wraps up the lawsuit, but presumably the love affair is still somewhat going on, because Warren said, I love you, when he hung up. But he did seem concerned about the future of their relationship, and I can only assume he's going to get another phone call saying, the cure worked, and Ben's
back.
And so bye, Warren. We're staying in New York too, so we don't have to, be back in Santa Barbara ever again. So.
Yeah. I feel like, well, especially since we know the Maggie Gillis actress does not come back to the show. So.
And I never checked, but presumably Ben doesn't either. I mean, it'd be kind of weird if Ben knocked on the door one day and said, "Hey, good news, Warren. Maggie and I are having a great life." So, but it's another one of those things where I think it could have been played out longer and more, not on the phone, more at the forefront. So it's pretty unfortunate because it was an interesting storyline. And of all the romantic impediments people in soap operas experience, this was kind of a unique storyline, and I think it should have been played out. It probably is a realistic one that happens in real life, not to a lot of people, but probably there are a few people in that situation where they have a spouse in a coma and are, torn between, starting a new romance and like being true to their spouse. So I think I would have liked to have seen that played out more thoroughly. Yeah,
I think it happens more to people than, having a doppelganger and having them wear a mask of your face. And
exactly. Julia's love story is less believable than Maggie's.
But having said that, yes, I think there were, I think with a lot of these stories that we talked about, the potential for characters like Lindsay, and I thought this one had some potential. I mean, imagine the kind of interesting love triangle you could have had if the relationship between Maggie and Warren had really blossomed and then Ben woke up. That would have been interesting too. So there could have been a lot of things that they could have done with that. I mean, since they had started, you think about Warren, Summer was killed, and then there was a little bit of flirtation with him and Elizabeth Peel, and that kind of faded away. And then there was this whole storyline with Maggie, and that's now being kind of shuffled off as well. So Warren's storylines have all kind of fizzled out, really.
It's kind of surprising, because, I mean, really, he's one of the two main families on the show. There doesn't seem to be any reason why they shouldn't be pushing him. I mean, probably they were thinking him in Eden early on, and maybe that's why the writers kind of floundered when they realized, now our plans for Warren have to be rejigged, but I don't see why they couldn't find something good for him. I mean, at least he has the newspaper, so there's potential for non-romance storylines for Warren, at least.
And he did actually, in the very, very, very beginning, have some kind of interesting interactions with Jade as well, and those could have gone to interesting places too, actually.
Yeah. So there's, about 50% of the characters that come and go on Santa Barbara kind of don't get, they're just desserts, in a positive way, I would say. And this, not unexpectedly, is the last time we'll see Morgan Malone, too. So he had his 2 episodes. So, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things I don't remember. Like, I don't remember the details about CeCe's storyline either, which is a much more front burner one. But yeah, I honestly didn't even remember Maggie Gillis at all, really. And so it's kind of sad that it petered out, and that, it kind of explains why I didn't remember her storyline ever having an ending. Because basically in 4 episodes, mostly one-sided phone calls, the whole thing is kind of raced ahead to almost being finished, I think. I suspect the writers are going to make one more phone call, and they might wait a week or 2 before Warren gets that phone call, but I think that'll be it for Maggie. Cruz wants Eden to abandon her party and come home with him. So Cruz suggests he could shout fire. Now, I think that's kind of considering the place did just catch fire a few weeks ago, that's probably a bad suggestion, but neither of them picks up on the fact. Eden decides to pretend to spill a drink on herself, and she has to do it several times to really get people to buy that she's got to go home to change her dress. So Cruz and Eden leave the room and have many opportunities to hear their song playing over their scenes for the rest of the episode. So. But at the party, the lights get lowered at one point, and the dance music gets cranked up. But Mary shows up, first at the Capwell house, looking for her mother. Mason shows up there and tries to get... Mason is there and tries to get her to have a drink with him at the Orient Express, but she asks for a rain check, so that seems to be like she is going to, pursue Mason and vice versa, which we already know is happening. So Mason didn't seem too angry with her. Theta eventually finds Sophia at the Orient Express and tells her that she's as good as any of the Capwells. And is she drunk?
She always sounds sort of drunk, even when she's sort of not. So.
We didn't see her drinking, but
you kind of always get the feeling she's tippling on the side.
So maybe she secretly has been drinking this whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find that out. Sophia, had been pretty good at being neutral during this conversation, but, as Theta keeps attacking the family, finally Sophia says, well, Christy is the one who's been lying this whole time. And then Theta blows up at that, and, because of her secret theory that the Capwells paid her off. But she ends up falling over and injuring her ankle, and then Ted tries to tend to it, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with Ted, but Mary finally shows up there and gets Ted to carry her down to the car, basically.
Yeah.
So I guess she must be in a lot of pain because she stops, fighting the idea of Ted Capwell helping her. Yeah. Based on how long it took Marcello to get downstairs that one time, Ted returns in a surprisingly short amount of time, even though there's a conversation between Mary and Sophia to sort of bridge that gap, but there was no commercial break or anything in between, so Ted just suddenly shows up. Mary apologizes to Sophia and then to Ted when he shows up, and Lakin isn't having any of that. She tells Mary her apology won't patch things up, and tells her entire family to just stay away. So that's a very Lakin thing to say, I think.
Yeah. Lakin's the harder case in the couple. And I think that's part of the reason Christy would not wanting to talk to Lakin with the warning to, about her mother on the rampage. She really held out to talk to Ted.
Steve returns home to get his gun. So that's why I'm wondering if he really did, was the person that Christy saw in the phone booth, because Steve came home alone to get his gun. So.
Now, the question then is, who is he wanting to shoot with that gun? Because he's obviously very, very upset with Christy for running away with all his money. So that would seem to be the obvious choice, but since and we know he's done enormous violence and almost killed her before, so I'm assuming that's who he's going after. But,
it could be. I mean, he certainly is probably unhappy with Ted, and probably doesn't like Mason too much either. So, I mean, depending on who he encounters when he's looking for Christy, that could be trouble for anyone, And if Ted and Lakin are together, it could be an accidental shooting of someone we don't even know.
Yeah.
Or don't even expect that he's actually targeting. So.
We know he's got this very irrational, disturbed side, and we almost saw hints of him disassociating a little bit early on after Christie's rape. So it'll be really interesting to see where that goes.
That is the end of the episode. As I said, Joel Bailey, who plays Lindsay, is gone for good now. The HR department at Santa Barbara is waking up because over the next couple of weeks, we've got a lot of shakeups in the cast happening. The first thing will be next week. There will be a temporary recast. Who do you think that will be?
Well, I think that we are going to lose Jack Stanfield Lee fairly soon. So I'm wondering if, because I think the actor himself was quite sick, so I'm wondering if they do a little bit of a temporary replacement until he actually leaves the cast. So that's one thought I have.
I would have thought that he was going to be in the scene with the $10 million check and Cece, and he actually wasn't. So, so that kind of surprised me, because I thought he would be around for that. But, you know, I guess it depends how important, you know, if he was sick, that scene went fine without him. Yeah. Although in real life you'd want your lawyer there, but maybe there is a scene next week that's so important that they can't just write around the character. I mean, no one mentioned that Kelly hasn't been at this party, right? So it's easy just to not mention someone. Nick theoretically was at all these trial dates, but the actor never was on the set at all for the courthouse at all. So. Yeah,
Kelly's absence, for me, has been quite noticeable over the last week, and yeah, it's weird that we didn't even see her in one of the episodes this week. I don't think we did.
I don't recall. No.
So, yeah, I'm
whoever it is, that someone is important enough that they can't just give their lines to someone else. So we will see. I forget what day that's going to happen. And then the week after, that's when things really start shaking up. So we will see that. And then we will see some, maybe some changes in the credits as well, even for people who aren't leaving. So that's another thing. Anyway, the next few weeks.
People going on contract, maybe rather than
contract
regular
status changing for, I think, at least one person in the very near future. So, yeah, we will see some new faces and some departing faces coming up. So that is it for week 65. Is that right? 56. 56. I thought 65 seemed high. Week 56 of Santa Barbara. Week 56 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We'll be back fairly soon with week 57. And I'm contemplating maybe releasing the episodes one at a time instead of bundling them in groups of 5 in the future. We'll see how that goes. First, I'm going to be, releasing this one as a bundle as usual, I think. But maybe next time that will get things out faster. All right, we will see you in week 57. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next time you have to get up and testify about our sex life, I want you to have more to talk about.
Well... Won't be long and she'll be out of our lives.
This is what you wanted. It's what you asked for.
You had everything you ever wanted. Well, I didn't. But that's going to change now, because when I marry Cece, it's all going to be different.
Heavens, how I've missed this stuff.
You should have drowned a long time ago. That's what they do with infected rats who infect everybody else.
Just wake me up when it's over.
Morning, darling.
Oh, God. Like I'm pregnant.
Well, you know how a girl can sometimes lose track of these things.
I know exactly who the father is. Just not sure I want him to know.
Now, there's nothing I can do about the two of you being married. It's over and done with, and I have to accept it.
Well, how gracious of you.
May I have this dance?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mommy, Daddy.